This is my daily writing recorded, part 2, titled Winchester and the Silver Watch. A better evening he could not wish for. A heavy rainstorm blew outside, as John sat in a large leather chair in the corner of the Winchester library. John was not alone. A man in his 80s stood at the other end of the library, in front of its large window that overlooked the vast Winchester estate before them. Tightly grasped in his hand was a small silver pocket watch. It used to belong to John, but he had parted with it so many years ago in favor of a job prospect up north. The job never materialized, and John had been without a watch ever since. The watch, though, was unimportant. John had found it once laying on the street. He assumed it had no owner and had kept it for many years. Most believed that the watch was a replica, that it was made out of tin and painted over with silver paint. Only John knew its true value, and relished in knowing no one else knew it too. That is, until the day he parted ways with it. The man he handed the watch to had accepted it mostly out of kindness, for he too did not believe its worth, and had soon parted with the watch with the gentleman that now stood at the front of the Winchester library. John wasn't too sure why he was here. He was summoned not a week ago by the estate, and had arrived under the promise that it would be worth his while. He now sat in the corner of the room, uncertain of what was to come next. He had sat in the chair for over an hour now. The gentleman up front had remained in front and had not once moved to turn around and face him. John wasn't even sure anymore if the gentleman knew he was there. His legs began to stiffen and his back began to hurt. It was not much longer now before he had to get up and stretch his legs. The pain from sitting still would otherwise be too unbearable. Another hour passed without any change. John, in the meantime, had managed to shift himself around in the chair. He had done so as quietly as possible, but on occasion, though, let slip in a loud noise in the hopes it would trigger the gentleman up front. Sadly, though, there was no such luck. John began to wonder what had happened to the butler that had let him in. He wondered about the other occupants of the estate and why he had yet to hear of them. All he could hear was the wind and the rain sweeping against the perilously thin glass of the large window up front. There were times John expected the glass to shatter and for the gentleman to react, though such thing never happened. The gentleman stayed where he was, forever unmoved and unwilling to compromise his posture. Another 10 minutes passed when John finally decided to give up. He got out of his leather chair and made as much noise as he possibly could doing so. The creaks and moans bounced off the bookcases and mingled themselves in with the stormy weather outside. "I'm sorry," he said ever so softly, "but I'm afraid I will have to go now. It's late, you see, and I have to get up early. There's a job waiting for me, and sorry, so, you understand, right?" John picked up his hat and waved it at the man in front. The gentleman did not respond, so John turned around and headed for the front door. "I've been told," the gentleman's voice suddenly loomed through the library, "that his watch used to belong to you." John turned around and took a few steps towards the gentleman. "I'm sorry," he replied. "I was told," the gentleman repeated, a bit louder and a bit firmer, "that this here pocket watch used to belong to you." He raised his right arm and let the pocket watch dangle from its silver chain. The watch twirled around and reflected brightly in the candlelight. John took another step towards the gentleman and peered at the silver watch. "I believe it is," he replied, holding his hat with both hands. "I see," the gentleman said. He lowered his right arm again and briefly scratched the top of his left ear. "How long has this watch been in your possession?" the man asked. John briefly thought about the question and was hesitant to answer. He said, "It's been a while. I was forced to part ways with it some time ago, and I actually was hoping to get it back." "I see," the man said. "I suppose I must thank you for finding it," John said. "Not many people would be that honest. I could see even most people keeping the watch for themselves rather than returning it to its rightful owner. So I suppose I should say thank you for your assistance." John paused for a second to breathe and think a little. "That is," he continued hesitantly, "why you summoned me here today, isn't it?" He could see the gentleman held the watch close to his chest, and that he had been staring at it for quite some time. He wondered what it all meant and worried that he might not get it back. He could surely use the watch by now. There was no job in Sussex, and the watch could at least get him a few weeks or more of food and shelter. Whatever he did after that was a worry for then and there. "Do you remember who gave it to you?" the gentleman suddenly asked. What do you mean? John replied. Who gave it his watch? The gentleman clarified. Well, John replied honestly, I suppose I found it. He slowly started to realize that the watch might be more than it seemed. I found it, he quickly added, amongst my mother's belongings. I found it after she passed away. I do not know where she got it from, but she had it. I see, the gentleman replied. See what? John asked, not understanding why the gentleman kept saying it. He also wanted to keep himself in the most neutral position as possible and decided to add a bit more. How did you come by this watch? John asked the gentleman. You must have found it somewhere, I suppose. The gentleman once again scratched the top of his left ear. I have, he answered with a deep sigh. It used to belong to my son. Oh, was all John managed to say. He was killed a while ago, though they did not find his watch with his belongings. John instinctively took a few steps back as his body began to heat up. His eyes darted around the library for any other possible way out, while his mind raced to find any excuse he could come up with to prove his innocence. I, he stammered. I'm so sorry. I can assure you I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even there. Wherever there is, or is supposed to be. As I told you, I lost it a week ago, or so, I think. So, I suppose the man who took it from me must have been the one that did the deed. John sighed deeply after he had spoken and wiped some of the gathering sweat from his brow. He could not remember the last time he had rattled on like that, and felt rather embarrassed that he had. It had made him look a lot more guilty, and that was problematic to say the least. John had quickly determined there was no other exit than the main one, and he also realized that there really was nowhere to run, even if he did get out of the estate and onto the land beyond. The lands were so vast and open that anyone could spot him from a mile away. His only hope was a storm and some good luck. The gentleman had not said a word so far. John wondered if his explanation had worked. He nevertheless workshopped another one in his mind, in case the situation called for it. And while his eyes darted around the library, the gentleman seemed determined. John did not know where he got it from, but all of a sudden it was there, staring him in the face, the gentleman with a hunting rifle in his hands. And John knew this was it. This is the end. Nothing more has been recorded or written down. Thank you for listening.